Hi everybody. Let's have a bedtime story, shall we? I'm going to speak for better or for worse. And what I've chosen tonight is very short, but it is about a national treasure who I don't think anyone would argue is one of the most likable people ever. She was and is still very loved by nearly everyone. And it's a little golden book about the lovely Betty White. Very hard person not to like. In fact, I'm not quite sure how you could not care for Betty White. She is quick-witted, feisty, ornery, but kind. And let's talk a little bit about her and just a very kind of outline, nowhere near comprehensive story of her career. And this was published in 2021. Beginning in 1922. Let's go. Betty White was born on January 17th, 1922, in Illinois and grew up in California. Betty and her parents enjoyed hiking, nature, and animals. She was an only child, but she got to be a sister to a lot of cats and dogs. Betty always felt surrounded by love, and she had spent her long and remarkable life giving that love back to family and friends, to audiences, and to animals in need. When she was young, Betty wanted to be a forest ranger or a zookeeper, but those careers weren't open to girls at that time. Luckily, Betty had other passions. She loved to write, to sing, and to perform in plays. Early on, she set her heart on being an actress. Betty graduated from high school in 1939, and 2 years later, America entered World War II. Betty wanted to help in any way she could, so she volunteered to drive a truck carrying supplies to soldiers stationed in California. After the war, Betty set out to follow her dreams. She knew getting into show business wouldn't be easy, but she was ready for anything. Determined, I would say. Betty was bright, talented, beautiful, and funny, but she had to work hard to find jobs. She acted in local theaters and got small roles in radio commercials. Betty wanted to be on television. Back then, there were far fewer TV shows, TV stations, or just TV jobs than there are today. But Betty's hard work finally paid off. In 1949, she got her first full-time job as the host's helper on a daytime show called Hollywood on television. It's making me yawn. Later, she became the host herself. Today, most television actors memorize lines from a script someone else has written, but not Betty. She had to think on her feet or wing it in front of a live studio audience. And there were no breaks because Betty and the other actors performed in the commercials too. In fact, I think back then a lot of them did this live many times. So there was no second try. It had to be perfect. This meant that Betty was in front of the camera 5.5 hours a day, 6 days a week. Could she do it? You bet she could. Betty learned a lot and loved every minute. And viewers adored her from the start. How could you not? Television grew and changed quickly, and so did Betty. She became one of the first female producers in Hollywood when she co-founded Bandy Productions that was named after one of her dogs. On Betty's first show, she had interviewed movie stars, but now Betty and her business partners decided to make a situation comedy, or a sitcom, about made-up characters. It was called Life with Elizabeth. And this time, Betty was the star. I don't know if that looks like her, but that doesn't really look like her in my opinion. But I think we all picture her as in her older years. She was still beautiful. Betty has always believed in being fair to all people. In 1954, when she hosted a variety show with skits and musical guests, TV stations in some parts of the country didn't want to air it. They didn't like the fact that black dancer Arthur Duncan was in the cast. They wanted Betty to fire him. That kind of prejudice made Betty mad. You don't want to make Betty mad. Arthur stayed on the show and had a long, successful career, and Betty and Arthur remained friends throughout the years. As a girl, Betty had enjoyed playing games with her mom and dad, and beginning in the 1950s, she became a popular guest on TV game shows. Betty's quick wit charmed everyone, including one special man, Alan Ludden, the host of a show called Password. Alan and Betty fell in love. They married in 1963, so Betty was 41. And Betty became stepmom to his 3 children. Betty and Alan lived happily together until Alan died in 1981. Sorry. That's improper yawning. Alan has always remained in Betty's heart. Life wasn't easy for her after his death, but staying busy helped her cope. Betty likes new challenges and taking on different roles. She studies, prepares, and works hard. That's one reason she's one of the most successful television stars in history. Betty is especially known for acting in 2 popular long-running TV shows, The Mary Tyler Moore Show and The Golden Girls. She won Emmy Awards for both shows. Betty has been honored many times. In 1995, she was inducted into the Television Academy Hall of Fame. Was Betty ready to stop working then? Nope. She wrote books about her life and kept acting in movies and on television. And at age 88, Betty became the oldest host of the comedy show Saturday Night Live. Betty received an Emmy for her performance, another honor in her long list of awards. Even with her busy acting career, Betty has always found time for animals. She has supported the Los Angeles Zoo for many years and has helped raise money to improve animal habitats and save endangered species, like the California condor. Fun fact, I did a book report on the California condor in 6th grade, I believe, maybe earlier. There are some massive creatures. I've seen one in person, and the wingspan was massive. Betty has also been lucky enough to meet some creatures that are just as famous as she is, including Coco the gorilla. Coco knew more than 1,000 words in sign language. In fact, Coco gave Betty the name Lipstick. She made the sign for the word whenever Betty came to visit. There's also a video on YouTube of Robin Williams and Coco. It's very touching. If you haven't watched it, it's a good way to spend a couple minutes. Along with helping wild animals, Betty supports groups that rescue pets, study animal health, and train guide dogs. Betty has loved cats and dogs since she was little. I grew up with pets. In our house, they were more than pets. They were members of the family, which is what every dog deserves. A very strong feeling that when you agree to get a pet, you've just made a responsibility, you've pledged responsibility to that pet, for better or for worse. And sometimes It's not convenient and sometimes it's hard, but we domesticated them. They can't take care of themselves. And although that dog may be just a chapter in your life, in that dog's life, you're his or her whole book. Keep that in mind. When Betty was 89, she adopted Ponty, a golden retriever who hadn't been able to finish his guide dog training. He's a guide dog dropout. Betty's talent and dazzling smile have lit up the world and brought joy to millions. Her passion for helping animals has inspired others to do the same. Betty loves to make the world happy. No wonder people and animals everywhere love her right back. Oh, that's close. Kind of looks like her. Kinda. And a quote from Betty is, I think everyone needs a passion. Whether it's one passion or 100, that's what keeps life interesting. Thanks for being you, Betty White. The world would have been a dimmer place without your presence. I hope you enjoyed. And if you aren't asleep already, what are you waiting for? Go to sleep. Good night, everybody.